The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Your Hour with APA Virginia, sponsored by the Berkeley Group. Your Hour with APA Virginia is hosted on the fourth Monday of each month from noon to 1 p.m. I'm going to give everyone a minute to get logged in and get settled. Thank you again for joining our webinar today. Before we get started, we want to remind you of a couple of exciting things APA Virginia has coming up and a couple housekeeping items. APA Virginia has decided to shift our annual conference planned for September in Richmond to a virtual format. As we transition to a virtual conference planned for the week of October 12, 2020, we appreciate your support and patience as we confirm all details regarding registration, programming, and sponsorships. We will share our regular updates as more information is available, and we look forward to learning with you in October for our virtual annual APA Virginia conference. Please keep an eye out for more information this month's webinar. As we do every month, this webinar, Transforming the Customer Experience, Online Plan Review and Permitting, will be recorded and posted to our YouTube page by the end of the day. We encourage you to visit our YouTube and see past webinars or share it with colleagues. As a reminder, we will hold all questions until the end, but as the webinar is going on, feel free to type your questions in the question box on your dashboard, and we will answer them at the end in the order in which they came in. Again, thank you to the Berkeley Group for making this webinar series possible. We're always looking for new webinar presenters or topics, so if you have one you would like us to look into, please email admin@apavirginia.com. As a reminder, please look to our websites and social media for updates on all chapter events and engagement opportunities. This month's webinar, Transforming the Customer Experience, Online Plan Review and Permitting, is presented by Deborah Albert, AICP. Debbie manages the Permit Arlington program in Arlington County, Virginia. Permit Arlington is an enterprise-wide initiative to develop and implement an online permitting system and to transform the county's building and land development and permitting business processes. Her previous work with Arlington County includes coordination of the zoning ordinance amendment program for the Department of Community Planning, Housing, and Development as a member of the comprehensive planning team. In that role, she developed policy, implemented plans, and conducted public outreach supporting a range of policies, including a rewrite of the zoning ordinance. Debbie previously worked as an environmental planner in Fairfax County, Virginia, and in conservation planning as GIS analyst and product manager for NatureServe and the Nature Conservancy. Debbie holds a Master of Community Planning from University of Maryland, a graduate certificate in GIS from SUNY Albany, and a BS in Biology and Environmental Studies from Tufts University. Also today we have Brian Hyatt. Brian is a director of Versivo, an IT and business process consulting firm with principal offices in Gainesville, Virginia. Retrieval offers flexible for a variety of business processes, including permitting and plan reviewing, agenda management, payables and receivables, courts and public safety, and more. Brian and Versivo have been implementing and supporting document management and workflow solutions for Arlington County since 2007, including the county's OnBase electronic plan review implementation in 2012. Brian serves as the OnBase integration lead for the Permit Arlington program, overseeing the design and development of the integration between the permitting and plan review components of the solution. Prior to joining Versivo, Brian was a senior consultant at CJ, where he implemented and supported medical records management and patient financial services solutions for hospitals across the nation. Brian graduated from James Madison University in 2004 with a degree in business administration, majoring in information systems and operations management. He is a certified OnBase installer and OnBase API developer. We also have today joining us Matthew Pfeiffer. He will join us for the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. At this time, I will go ahead and turn over the camera to our presenters.
Thank you, Paige. And thank you to APA and for all of you for being with us today. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about Arlington County overview. And sorry, my slides continue to go forward there. Give me just a second. Okay. So we're going to start today by giving an overview of Arlington County and the land entitlement process overview. Debbie's going to talk a little bit about the Permit Arlington program. We're going to cover the solution features and walk through the OnBase system that the county is using. We'll talk about challenges and lessons learned, and then we'll talk a little bit about how other localities can get started with online permitting and plan review. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie.
Okay, thanks, Paige, and thanks, Brian, for kicking that off. We're pretty excited to be here with APA Virginia today. So as Brian said, I'm going to start out just to give you a little bit of context of kind of the community that our permitting system needed to serve. I want to give you an overview of Arlington County. Arlington is located in the core of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan region. It's actually part of the original 10-mile square land grant that was given to Washington, D.C. to form that federal district that was later then returned. The Arlington portion was later returned back to Virginia. Our 2020 population is 228,000, and that population lives within just under 26 square miles. We're actually the smallest self-governing county in the country. And within the county, actually more than half of the county population lives within 3 major planning corridors. On the right half of the screen here, you'll see those 3 major planning corridors shown on our general land use plan. In the northern portion, our Roslyn-Ballston corridor, and then in the southern portion of the county, the Richmond Highway corridor. Both those 2 corridors are actually metro corridors, as well as our Columbia Pike planning corridor, which is subject to the county's form-based code. And most of our development is actually within those 3 planning corridors, covering only 22% of the county's land area. Within those areas, we've planned for a very dense urban form. The county actually has more office space than the downtowns of Los Angeles, Denver, and Atlanta, over 41 million square feet of rentable building area. Just to give you an idea, the photo on the left shows the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, and you can see a little bit in that photo and in the light yellow on our general land use plan that outside of those corridors, the county transitions really quickly to single-family detached zoning. And that becomes important as we talk a little bit about what our public process looks like. And to give you a sense of kind of how many applications and permits our permitting system needs to process on an annual basis, I want to give you a sense of what was approved through the county's special exception process just last year in 2019. In 2019, our elected county board approved more than 2 million square feet of office gross floor area, as well as 172,000 square feet of retail, over 28,000 residential units, and 870 hotel rooms. So basically a lot of development. What those approvals kind of translate into on an annual basis, we issue roughly 20,000 building and trade permits. So that's plumbing, electrical, gas, et cetera, as well as building permits annually. And those 20,000 building and trade permits result in over 60,000 annual inspections. So because of the proximity of these planning corridors to single family zoning, our public process or our land entitlement process, I should say, gets a lot of attention. We have a very engaged population and residents who are very interested in being part of the process. So on the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about what our land use entitlement process looks like. And if Brian could just switch to the next slide. Thanks. Arlington actually uses something called incentive zoning in order to implement our plans. Incentive zoning is specifically enabled for us, for Arlington County under Virginia State Code, and it allows substantial flexibility in form, in use, and in density for fulfilling the requirements or the guidelines articulated in the vision in our land use plans. So through those major corridors where our dense urban plan is planned, the by right zoning is actually a very traditional Euclidean zoning. If someone were to try to develop by right within those areas, they would typically get one use, either residential or commercial, and no more than 1 to 3 stories in height. That obviously doesn't develop the urban form that we're looking to in our area and sector plans. The other thing that's important to recognize here is that Arlington essentially has vacant land. So essentially all of our development is redevelopment. So in order to incentivize property owners and developers to redevelop in these urban planning corridors, and particularly to develop in the way that we envision it looking per our general land use plan, they need incentive that would make it worth it financially for them to take an active property out of use and redevelop it as something else, and in addition to have to demolish the building and structures that are on that property. So hence comes in our site plan review process. Our land entitlement process is what we refer to as site plan review. And it is, again, a very, very engaged process. The residents who decided these corridors are very interested in seeing and being involved in and weighing in on what gets developed. So over the last several decades, we've developed a process whereby a developer, they propose something that's consistent with our plan, they are given the opportunity to have substantially more height, density, and range of uses than you would get under the by right process. So for example, in Roslyn, which is in the eastern half of the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, and in Crystal City, which is in the Richmond Highway corridor, those are the two densest areas of the county. Rather than that, 1.5 stories and single use get up to 25 to 30 stories. Alternatively, in the Columbia Pike corridor, you can get up to 95 feet. So that's substantially more development. And then developers will typically come in, proposing ground floor retail with mixed in residential or office or both on the upper stories. And that's the type of development envisioned in our land use plans. So there can be several rounds of submittals for a given site plan, and you'll see this as Brian walks through our new permitting system later. It provides a great example of all of the features of our permitting system because it is some of the most complicated applications that we have in that. During the site plan review process, the plan is discussed at length through a series of public meetings that are facilitated by a subcommittee of the Planning Commission. And during that process, the Planning Commission is joined by representatives of the neighborhood, as well as representatives of other groups and commissions in the county. Applicants are encouraged to submit a conceptual plan, and then following that process, they'll submit a preliminary application, which is reviewed by a multidisciplinary group of staff. And then once that review is complete, they are asked to submit their final application, which enters the public review process. That process can last anywhere from 1 month, one meeting, to up to 1.5 years to 2 years, depending on the size and complexity of the project. So again, this provides a good example of how our new permitting system allows for online applications, as well as collaboration between disciplines as the plans are reviewed, as well as accommodates resubmittals and slip sheeting of plans as things are revised. So moving on to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about how we got into online permitting. These days, nobody really needs any convincing as to why online permitting is important. Like many other jurisdictions, our permitting office closed to the public completely on March 15th, and we are still closed. But fortunately, the timing worked out really well for us that we delivered at least half our permits in our new online permitting system last September. We had a couple major goals for the new online permitting system. Back in 2016, when we first envisioned the system, we developed these goals, and they have remained relevant in the 4 years since. One of the obvious ones being to provide better technology and communication, building a system that is more compatible with modern technology platforms. Our old legacy-based database that we use for permitting, still in use for half our permits, is not so compatible with Windows 10, and so it really is reaching its end of life. We also had a goal of streamlining our business processes, but equally as important, we had goals of improving the way we provide customer service. Our permitting system is actually funded through a 10% surcharge on all permits. So our development community is paying for the system. They know they're paying for it, and their expectations are high. And so we have put customer experience in as important as developing a new permitting system. On the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. This is sort of a long history. Like I said, we've been at this for 4 years now, but actually before we envisioned a whole new permitting system, we did have some online plan review, and that's where ePlan, the OnBase ePlan product, comes in. Back in 2013, or actually starting in 2012, our Department of Environmental Services began a project to create online plan review using a product called ePlan. The product was pretty new at the time, but it was pretty successful for the civil engineering plans that the Department of Environmental Services wanted to review online, allowing good collaboration and a much easier process internally. So in 2016, our building department followed suit, and we also added our building permits and land disturbing area permits to the ePlan system. And by the time we started our new permitting system in 2016, we had about 50% of our building permits were submitted electronically. The other 50%, because it was optional, were still submitted via paper. But that was definitely a substantial advantage for staff. So the ePlan system provided the ability for applicants to submit their plans online. Staff would then manually enter tabular information into our legacy database, Permits Plus. So it basically provided a plan review component and a way and a workflow to share and review the plans. But from the database side, we still had all of our data in our legacy Permits Plus system. While the ePlan product was fairly new when we first implemented it for civil engineering plans, and it was a little rough in the beginning, we didn't know that 4 years later, we would have such a strong following by both staff as well as the building community in that ePlan product, that no other plan review platform would be robust enough to support our internal review and public process. So in 2016, when we contracted with Accela to build a full new permitting system, we still didn't, we thought we were going to abandon ePlan at that point and use the internal plan review components that come with Accela. That was intended to be a 15-month project. We were contracted with Accela, and we were going to build 75 different types of permits that the county processes. 8 months into that 15-month project, we got to the point where we were going to build the plan review component of the system, and everybody kind of got to look at that plan review component and what it was going to do for the first time since we had gone through the RFP process. And it was pretty immediate consensus that it just wasn't going to work for us. The plan review component that came with Accela was more of an Adobe product. It was going to allow us to kind of review plans, but it wasn't going to allow that joint markup and all of the workflow that we really depended on from ePlan. And it was apparent not just to staff, but also to Accela as they were demonstrating it to staff that it just wasn't going to work for us. And so then we were in kind of a bind. We'd gone through 8 months of a 15-month contract. So our leadership, the sponsors of the project, went through and they made some really, really difficult decisions, which was basically to put the whole project on pause and kind of rethink the whole thing. That pause ended up being 9 months long, but 3 major things happened during that pause that I think brought us to be able to successfully deliver the first half of the system last September. One was to restructure this thing of the entire program. And to really think how we were running it. I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to lessons learned at the end. The second was that we really needed the ePlan product in order to do plan review the way we do plan review. And so we decided to take 3-4 months to build a proof of concept to see if we could integrate that ePlan product with the Accela product. And the idea is that we didn't want to have two different systems. We wanted it to look like, from the customer standpoint, a seamless kind of one product. And then third, once we demonstrated that that was possible, we had to renegotiate our statement of work in order to accommodate that additional work. And then at the end of the day, we would have that front-end customer portal as well as the back-end database coming from Accela, combined with the robust plan review capabilities of ePlan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit about some of the functions that the system provides and to give you a little taste of what the system looks like.
Thank you, Debbie. So OnBase Plan Review has all the necessary components that help streamline planning and permitting processes, improve the experience of both staff and applicants, and provide better transparency to the community. As we have pictured here, OnBase provides features for submission, process management, collaboration, version control, and long-term storage. And it combines an external portal for submission for the customers, along with an internal dashboard for staff to manage their assignments and see their deadlines. One of the great things about OnBase is it provides real-time collaboration on a single plan set for all the reviewers. So, in the paper world or in some ePlan systems, you still have multiple copies you're working with. In an OnBase solution, you're working on all of one single set of plans with markups and comments that are being added from across the organization, but visible to all of the reviewers. There's also comparison tools to easily highlight changes made by the customer from submission to submission. And it also automates the final stamping of plans and the final storage of those plans permanently. Just to take a closer look at some of the solution features. It all starts with the customer portal. There's a user-friendly interface to submit the applications, upload plans and drawings and supporting documents. There's automated file validation to check for things like password encryption, checking for appropriate sheet sizes and other rules. And this is also where the customers are going to come back and the status of their review and all of their review results and approvals. There's an automated workflow engine that's highly configurable. We talked a little bit about this. Arlington has a pretty unique process, and most localities do. And so the workflow can be configured to meet your specific business process. There's simultaneous reviews, which are huge when it comes to reviewing plans. There's also sequential reviews. So if in a specific department, there's multiple levels of review, that's fine as well. Lots of assignment options for how people get assigned, whether they're assigning themselves or being assigned by managers or an automated round robin assignment. Really lots of possibilities there. There's a built-in engineering viewer, and this viewer provides advanced page navigation, lots of options for navigating the image, zooming and panning. There's powerful markup and measurement tools to add all of your lines and arrows and shapes and highlights, being able to complete line and area and perimeter measurements. There's powerful commenting tools to add free text comments as well as choosing from a comment library. A big part of the system is built-in version control and comparison. Every time a sheet is modified by a submitter or slip sheeting or uploading new plans, all of that is tracked automatically. Staff is able to clearly see which revisions have been changed, which files have been changed, and they can easily see all of the open comments and markup associated with all of the plans. There's also a comparison feature that will highlight all of the changes from submission to submission, so staff can see pretty clearly what the customer has changed. There are reporting dashboards. There's a self-service reporting tool that provides graphical views of the process. You can get insights into trends and potential bottlenecks, seeing how long reviews are taken, different types of reviews, and these dashboards can be shared across the organization. All of this is built into an innovative user interface. Staff can get to everything they need within one screen in OnBase. They can get to all their plans and documents, they can create letters, they can run workflow tasks. All of the plans are organized for them by discipline and sheet type, so they can focus in on what they need. And as they're reviewing, they can open up sheets either one by one, or they can open them up as a set to work with them as if they were submitted all together. OnBase has a lot of capability around integrations. Today, we're going to be looking at the Accela integration for Arlington. but it really can be used to complement almost any existing or new permitting system, or in the case of Arlington, like Debbie mentioned, it's really both, integrating with the legacy permitting system and the new permitting system. We also have capabilities for online payment and ESRI-GIS mapping, as well as just development toolkits to build out lots of other customizations and integrations. And then finally, document management. OnBase at its core has robust document management capabilities with document retention, anything else you would need related to storage and management of the documents. And it's nice to have one system that can consolidate really all of the documentation associated with planning and permitting, and be able to use that to also share that documentation across the organization and with the public. This is an illustration of kind of a standard OnBase automated workflow process. This includes everything from submitting the plans, routing for review, marking up, getting changes from the customer as needed, and then ultimately comparing the changes and getting to approving the plans. Like I said, this is kind of a standard basic workflow. The nice thing is that, with OnBase, all of this can be customized as needed for each locality to meet the specific way that that locality needs to use the system for their way of doing business. And even within that, it can vary greatly based on the type of application and how staff needs to review that application. But regardless of the business process, utilizing workflow, having digital plans means that review statuses are easy to see, assignments can be tracked, and review deadlines are easier to meet. So with that, we're going to dive into a solution demo. Like Debbie talked about, we're going to see the special exception site plan process. There are a lot of steps in this process, starting with a new site plan application, going through a preliminary plan review. There's then a subsequent plan review, or oftentimes multiple rounds of plan review. There's a public review process where there's a lot of things happening outside of the system, so we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as the final approval process. There's a lot to cover here. We won't go over everything in detail, but we just want to be able to walk through the process and cover some of the features and functions that come with the solution. I do have a pre-recorded video that we'll talk over live in the interest of time. So we're going to start with a new site plan, application, and plan submission. Right now we're on the Accela portal page where customers can come and submit their new application. So we're going to go through and select our special exception site plan. We'll kick this off by searching for an address and pulling up and entering in some basic site plan application information. As you'll see here, as we walk through, we'll just answer all of the required questions. The answers to these questions can actually impact the review process as well. So once the application is submitted and we start getting into workflow, we can reference back to these answers and use them to drive the workflow process. Here we're going to enter in some contact information for people associated with this project. And once we've done that, we're going to be taken to a screen where we can review our application, we can make any edits that we need to, and then ultimately we can proceed with certifying and continuing. And now we're taken to the plan review portion, where we're able to upload all of our drawings and supporting documents. Here we have some instructions with links to naming conventions, where we provide instructions and recommendations for how people should name their files. We also have a link to detailed submission guidelines, so customers can get access to how they should submit. We have example layout templates that provide instructions for those documents. To upload drawings, we can just browse for one or more files, and you'll see them populate on the screen here and allow the customer to select which type of files they're submitting, and then quickly upload them into the system. If there are any issues, the system will call that out and let the customer know that there are problems with those files. Down below, we can see what's required for supporting documents. A site plan application not only needs plans, but lots of other documents as well. So the customer can browse for those files, choose the type of document, and once they have everything uploaded, we're ready to submit. When we submit, we get a warning. We'll be told kind of what's coming next. And then we'll transition into the county being able to take a look at these plans and applications and proceed with the process. So the first step of the staff process for a new site plan is to conduct a completeness check. So this is the OnBase interface for staff. I'm going to go into the completeness check queue and select my project. We'll see that the plans are automatically organized by discipline and sheet type. We can see the basic information about the project, what the due date's going to be. We can see all of the documents that were submitted, and we'll dive more into the documents in detail later in the process. During the completeness check, we're also going to take a look at the application over in Accela. So we have a single-click integration that's going to take us to the Accela screen and let us review the application. We can see what the fees are associated with this, and we can invoice for them. And so now let's say we've completed our completeness check. This is ready to go, and we're going to need to collect a payment before we proceed with the rest of the review process. So we'll notify the customer to make a payment. And now they will be able to go to the portal and submit that payment electronically. So back on that same portal, we'll click to pay the fees. We can see what we're being invoiced for. Continue with the payment. In this case, we'll pay by credit card. Enter in our credit card information and proceed. And then once we've paid, we're ready to go to the next step of the process, which is our preliminary plan review stage. We'll start this with a coordinator review, and the coordinator is going to see, they have a number of tasks available to them here in workflow. They're going to start by, again, similar to the completeness check, taking a look at the documents. They can open documents one by one, so we can double click and open up a plan sheet. We can view these side by side and open as many windows as we need to, or we can select all of the drawings or a subset of the drawings and open them as a set. And so this is going to allow us to, even though they were submitted separately, page through them and be able to interact with them either way. Now that we've had a look at the documents, we're going to send this out for review for other groups. And so we'll be able to set some due dates and pick which groups are going to have to review this as part of the initial preliminary plan review process. Next, we'll switch over to the department review. We've assigned this out to a number of users to review for the preliminary plan review. And so as that user, again, I have my own queue of projects that have been assigned to me, and we'll just pull up a document to take a look at the engineering viewer. We'll start by talking about some of the page navigation. We can fit to width. We have a lot of different zooming and panning options. So you'll see me kind of zoom in and out of the file here and pan around. Zoom out and show the selection zoom tool where we can zoom in on a specific area. We also have some preset zooms as well as the slider zoom capability. If we need to, we can rotate the pages. We also have a page view capability where you can pan around the image this way as well and resize and focus in on different areas of the drawing. So lots of different ways to navigate the documents. Next, we'll talk about markups. There are line markups, shape and highlight markups, as well as text, sticky note, and image markups. With all of the markups, you can customize the look and feel, the style, the font, the size. We'll just take a couple minutes here and draw out some different markups as some examples. So there's an arrow, we have clouds. We can change the style of these. We'll try out the polyline tool. You can do open-ended polylines. All of the shapes, once you've added them, can be resized, moved around, rotated, changed as needed. You also can use polylines to create shapes. So in this case, we'll create a polygon, or you can just use the polycloud and polygon shapes to draw those as well. Try out the freehand here a little bit. And then if we zoom in on an area, we can take a look at some highlighting as well. You can do freestyle highlighting as well as shape highlights. Let's take a look at adding some text comments as well. So here we're going to expand our review comments panel and type in a comment that they need to add some additional accessible parking. And then in addition to adding that comment, we can draw a text leader to be able to indicate that they should see that comment for more detail. You also can add comments from the comment library. And so we can search through this comment library to find comments that apply to this plan. You can also do that with sticky notes. So we could drop a sticky note on the drawing, search through the comment library to find an associated comment and add it. And the nice thing with sticky notes is that if we're somewhere else in the document, we can always click that sticky note to go back to that place. We'll take a look at now all the markups we've added. These are all added in a layer, and so if we need to, we can hide them and focus in on other parts of the drawing. And markups from all the different reviewers that are reviewing can be shown and hidden as needed. Here we'll focus in on a part of the image and conduct some measurement. So first we will calibrate. So we'll enter in the actual measurement here between the 2 points. We can see that length there. If we needed to, we also could set the scale by ratio or factor. And so then if we take measurements, they should be calibrated. So we can get our length there. If we turn off the snap 2-point feature, we can run freehand measurements. And then let's zoom out a little bit and we'll try out the polyline measurement tool so we can get a area and perimeter. We'll just draw around this proposed building addition. And then we can see we get our perimeter and area measurements there. If we wanted to, we also can do that as a markup. And so we can draw that same measurement, but this time you'll see we're getting a markup on the screen. And so we can leave that area there for the customer to see when we return it to them. We can also resize measurements and have the measurements adjusted accordingly. So now we'll save our markups. We can see that the system shows that we have open comments and markup there. And even though we have some comments, we're going to go ahead and accept the plans. Since this is the preliminary plan review, we'll accept it with comments and we'll let it proceed to the next step of the process. Once all the reviewers have finished their review, it's going to return to the coordinator to decide if we should move forward with preliminary filing acceptance. In this case, to move forward, we will just proceed even though we have some comments. But the coordinator can see those comments. They can reveal all the different groups that were assigned and what their recommendation was, whether we should reject or approve and move forward. And then we can also get a quick look at the comments that were added and actually quickly get to the documents that have comments on them to review it and decide how we should proceed. In this case, we will just proceed with the preliminary filing acceptance. So I can create a preliminary filing acceptance letter using a template in the system. And this is going to populate with some template data as well as with the comments specific to this project that we've added. We can put this letter through a editing and signature process to have it signed off on by others in the department. And then once it's been signed, we can proceed with accepting the preliminary filing and notifying the customer. At this point, we'll move into the next stage of the process, which is plan review. This will be very similar, and I won't go through all of the details again. But basically at this point, we'll either have a new set of plans or we're continuing with the same set from the preliminary review. We'll send it out to review again and allow those reviewers to provide additional comments. So now we'll switch back to department review again. I won't bother going through all of the markup and comment capabilities, but I will show here from the hit list, we can actually add comments as well. And so just as an example, we'll add some comments there and proceed with a rejection. Say that revisions are going to be required. Back as the coordinator, we, again, after everyone has finished their review, we'll have an opportunity again to view what the review results were, what were all the decisions by the various departments that were assigned, and are we going to need to ask the customer to provide a resubmission. So we can see the approvals and rejections there. Again, we can take a detailed look at what comments were added. Now that we have a lot of comments, it's a little more useful to group by the department. So we can see who added what, and from there delve into the details as needed. Once we're ready, since we are going to require resubmission, we can create a review results letter. Similar to the preliminary filing acceptance, this is going to populate the data for us automatically for the review. but be more focused on a resubmission and getting back the responses from the customer. We also can create a plan set. This plan set is going to automatically pull in all of that markup that we added, as well as embedded comments, the text comments that we created, along with bookmarks to all of the various pages that have comments on them. And so now that we have our letter and plan set, we're going to share those with the customer. We'll run our revisions required return to submitter task. And now the submitter is going to be notified, and they'll be able to go back out to the portal to conduct a resubmission. So from the portal, the customer can initiate a edit process where they'll be able to, if needed, edit any portions of the application and submit their updated information. They'll upload any revisions to plans and drawings. This is the slip sheeting that Debbie was referring to earlier, where you don't need to upload everything. You only need to upload what's changed. So we'll upload a revision of the site plan. And then if we needed to, we could upload supporting documents. We ask for customers to upload a comment response letter. They can do that as well. And then they'll submit for review. At this point, we're going to go through, after it's been submitted, we'll go through another round of plan review. Again, we're not going to re-show the same things we already went through, but I do want to point out that once it goes back out to the submitter, to the reviewers to review again, they can easily compare and see what the customer has changed. So we'll go out and assign these to groups again. And we'll go in as one of those users and actually take a look at the comparison as well. So if we pull up the drawing that was modified, we can use the comparison tool to compare, and you'll see it's automatically calling out those changes in green and red. We also have a monochrome view, which is sometimes a little easier to use. We can zoom in on those changes, scroll around the image and see what's happened there. If we need to, we can actually use these tools to drown out the unchanged content and focus in on the changes. We can remove move the overlay position as needed, and we can actually compare to other documents and other revisions if we need to. Assuming everything's been resolved by the customer, we can go out and mark our comments as resolved, and then proceed with accepting the plans. Once all the reviewers have completed their review and there's no more rejections at this point, we'll proceed with moving forward with the next step of the process, which is indicating that the filing is complete, but we're going to start the public review. Now, public review, like Debbie spoke about before, is something that's happening really mostly outside of the system. There's lots of meetings, there's lots of things happening for the approval process, but we want to be able to use OnBase to track that process. And so in here, we can use this feature to track meeting information, enter in the meetings that we're having, when they're occurring, any decisions that come out of those meetings, along with any staff comments associated with it. And if you have meetings that are being scheduled, you can also come in here and enter them just to kind of keep track and make sure everyone is aware of where things stand for this application. We also can store any documents associated with what's going on with this project. So we have a staff supporting documents feature that allows staff to store really anything, board reports, presentations, anything else that may be appropriate for this record. And if they need to, they can actually share that with the customer as well. Once we've finished that process, everything's been approved, and there's no more documents to store associated with it, we can indicate that the public review is complete. And now we'll move into the final approval process. So the customer is going to be asked to make a final payment. And then once they've paid, the county is going to be prompted to sign and stamp the plans. So we'll go in as the final approver, and with a single click, we can again view the plans if we need to, but then go ahead and sign them. And we'll just take a quick look at what that stamp looks like. Zoom in here and see the approval stamp. And then the last step, once it's been signed, is to issue these plans back to the customer as approved. So we have an issuance process where the coordinator can go in, make sure everything's ready to go, everything's been signed off on, and then click the checkered flag to issue the approved documents. As the customer, we can go back to the portal, we can get to our approved documents and download them here. And then lastly, we're also providing this content to the public. So since these are planning records, once the plans are submitted, we make them available for public search and retrieval. So customers can come out here and search and be able to view those plans just like staff can. Obviously, they don't have the internal tools for review and markup, but it's just public access for retrieval purposes. And so we can pull that plan set up here, and that's all we have to show for the demonstration. So now I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to talk a little bit about lessons learned.
Thanks, Brian. And it looks like I got a little bit behind, so I'm going to see if Brian can escape. There we go. So starting with lessons learned, lots. We learned a lot over the last 4 years, and it was actually hard to kind of boil this down into one slide's worth. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly so we can cover a little bit more of this maybe in the Q&A. But a couple of things to highlight. So the first is that permitting is really, really complicated. Software projects for complex processes like permitting are they really require iterative thinking. And so one of the things we learned during phase 1 that we're applying to our second phase of the project is to be agile, to really allow us to benefit from what we're learning along the way, and kind of make those changes in the way we gather requirements and the way we build the system along the way. And that served us really well as we're moving into our second phase. The second thing is I think, and I've continuously, this is throughout phase 1 and phase 2, one of our biggest challenges during the project is documenting requirements. One of the reasons for that, I think, is that permitting by its nature is a very reactive process, right? You receive a plan or you receive a permit, and you're comparing it against, whether it's building code or zoning code or an area plan or sector plan, and you're looking at that plan and seeing where it does and doesn't meet the administrative requirements. That's a very reactive process. But software development is a very proactive process. You kind of have to know what you're going to build, and you need to know what the whole process looks like before you build it. And so what we're asking to do, our staff to do, because they're the subject matter experts when they're documenting processes, is tell us what the whole thing looks like, and start from the beginning and go in a very linear fashion to the end and tell us what the process is. So you're really, in a lot of ways, you're asking people whose job it is to react to things to do something that is really inherently against their nature. But you really need to do that to build software. And documenting the requirements is, again, really, really hard. It's hard for staff who have not been involved in software development before to kind of visualize, before they can tell you what they want the system to do, they want to know what the system can do. But before you have a system, it's really hard to show that to them. So that's been one of our biggest challenges that we've been working through. The third thing I wanted to highlight is really the benefit of interim steps along the way. If we had waited until now to say, okay, we need online permitting, online plan review, it would have been, we developed online plan review in 2013. We certainly weren't ready to build a whole new permitting system at that point. That took an RFP process and a funding structure and a number of other things. But I can't emphasize enough the long-term payoffs that we benefited from having had ePlan in place in 2013. It gave us, as Brian said, an opportunity to kind of work through what that review process looked like internally. And it also, unexpected for all of us, it allowed us in March, when we closed our permit office, it really allowed us to pivot within 48 hours to kind of a seamless continuation of providing permitting once we closed our office to the public, because we already had staff and customers who were familiar with how to review plans online. So that was a huge benefit. And then the fourth thing I wanted to highlight is that, and this has been a theme a little bit throughout the presentation, and going back to kind of what our goals were in creating a new online permitting system, is that the people are super important. You know, the best permitting system in the world is not going to replace the need for people. Multiple questions are needed on an online form to replace that interaction you have with, say, a building permit customer who's like, what kind of building permit do I need? Is it an addition? Is it a new? You know, you really need to kind of think about those questions when you're creating an online form. And the online form needs to represent things that are, you know, you want to get to answers that are driven by code or plans, but you need to do it in a series of questions that doesn't require interaction. So that's challenging. And I guess the last part of this, from the customer experience perspective, is really not to underestimate the amount of training it takes to get staff to adopt a new system. It's hard, right? And, you know, particularly for those folks who are working on the front line and they're interacting with customers on a daily basis, they can't do their jobs if they don't know how to use the system. So training is a huge piece. I talked a little bit about how, you know, we restructured the entire program when we went on that pause during the process. And one of the things that I think set me up for success, I actually came into the program as the program manager after that pause, or at the beginning of that pause, as part of the restructure. And one of the things that I was asked to, and that I feel like I've brought to the program, is, you know, really thinking about it. I'm a planner by training. I don't have an IT background, but here I am managing a program that's developing a software project. And what I've tried to do throughout the process to bring in that customer experience component is really the kinds of things you do when you're executing a planning project. And that is a lot of public outreach and a lot of communication. Those things have been really, really important. And the public, I guess in this case, is not just your sort of traditional public that you would work with in the middle of a planning process, but our public is also staff who are end users of the system. And actually, that's part of the reason we've got Matt Pfeiffer here with us, who'll join us for the Q&A in a minute. He's actually one of our end users. He's a site plan coordinator, and he's now supervising the site plan team. So those are just a few real quick lessons learned, but there have been many. But in the interest of time, I will pass it back to Brian on some quick kind of getting started steps.
Sure, thanks, Debbie. So just very quickly, you know, as Debbie said, these implementations are not simple, you know, especially for a large organization like Arlington. But we also heard about the importance of interim steps, and definitely, you know, having a plan review solution, you know, set the county up for maintaining business as usual in these challenging months, and even expanding online services in some ways. And so when we look at how localities can get started, we do have kind of a concept of a plan review quick start, where you can really focus in on getting your customer portal stood up, having an automated workflow, being able to have access to all these tools for viewing and commenting and marking up, version control, and maybe phasing in later on some of the add-on functionality, more enhancements to the workflow, more customizations to your business process, integrating with permitting systems and having online payment and map integrations, being able to conduct inspections virtually, adding users onto the system, and even going beyond permitting and plan review to related solutions like agenda management, meeting management, you know, contract management, FOIA requests, you know, backfile scanning projects of all your paper. There's so many things that you can get into that are related to this process. And so focusing in on those things that will really help transform quickly is possible, and can be something that other localities can do a little bit more quickly. And so with that, here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us with any follow-up questions, and hopefully we have some time here for some Q&A right now.
Thank you again to our panel members, and thank you to all who are attending. We have a few short minutes left for some Q&A, so I'll go ahead and start reading off some of those questions so our panel members can answer them for you. And, as I said before, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the chapter's YouTube page at the end of the day. So if there is anything that you missed or you want to review again, you will be able to do so later on. So for our first question, we have, does OnBase equal ePlans?
That's a good question. OnBase is a content services platform that provides document management and workflow across really a variety of solutions, both for government and private industry. Electronic Plan Review, or ePlan, is one of the modules offered by OnBase.
Our next question is, how many revisions do plans in Arlington typically have?
I think that might be a good question for me to take. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. I'm, as Debbie mentioned earlier, I'm the site plan review supervisor for Arlington County. So revisions, it kind of depends on where in the process the plan is. So for a preliminary plan, where we're doing sort of a technical review with very high level substantive policy comments, we usually have about 2 revisions, 2 plan sets. Now, when we get into public review, when we're doing a fulsome non-technical policy-based review where it's going out to every internal reviewer to look for issues, we typically will have a submission that we will provide comments on. We will go through the site plan review process, and then we will look for another submission after the conclusion of this site plan review process prior to public hearings. And that submission is intended to capture both and respond to the comments that staff has raised in the final accepted review, as well as any public comments that come out of the site plan review process. So we look at about 4 plan sets total. Now, sometimes if things aren't fixed in a timely manner, or if multiple issues keep arising, we could be looking at more than 4, but typically 4 is a good benchmark.
Our next question is, talk about the one-line payment links with your treasurer's office. Does that make?
I can take at least a try at answering it. I think basically the way that we've set up the online payment integration is that the customer sees the line item invoice. When they click to pay, they have one total balance that they pay for all of those items. But once that payment is posted back to the permitting system, they, I believe, flow into the systems for the Treasury as individual line items to the various cost codes that are associated with them. Debbie may be able to speak a little bit more about that if needed.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing. Our system, in addition to integrating with OnBase ePlan, is actually also integrated with our, the system that our treasurer's office uses to process payments. So that information gets sent directly to that system. Similarly, it's also integrated with the process that we use for issuing business licenses in the county, and it goes straight into that database. And then the fourth one, in the state of Virginia, it's integrated with the Department of Professional Education, so that when, for like building permits and stuff like that, people can see people's professional licenses that are required for certain types of permits. So there's actually multiple integrations, but the payment information actually goes directly to the treasurer's office through the system.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is the suggested screen size or resolution for your digital plan review?
You want me to take that one, Debbie?
That'd be great, Matt. I know you guys did some
I think definitely be the.
Yeah, but maybe Brian has a more specific answer than I was going to give. I was just going to say very generally. I don't think unless Brian jump in if I'm wrong here. I don't think we have a specific screen size in mind, but I will tell you, as someone who has used the system, the bigger the screen, the better. You know, you know, when the system launched, the site plan review team was issued 2, I think, 27-inch monitors, and that has actually worked quite well for the e-plan review component of it. Since we've gone out on the pandemic and all of us are working from home, many of us are working on laptops, and it's a little bit more challenging, I would say, than using the large screens.
Yeah, I think Matt answered it well. You know, one of the big things is definitely the second monitor. So even if you're going to have screens that aren't necessarily 27 inches or larger, having a second monitor is really helpful when reviewing plans and being able to pull things up side by side, have a comparison window on one screen and have your other plans on another screen is helpful as well.
Paige, were there additional questions?
I'm just going to pull up the questions view here because I'm not sure if we lost Paige or if there's an issue.
Okay.
So let's see here. Matt, this is a good one. For you, how long does the typical acceptance and completeness check take?
We like to separate the completeness check, the initial completeness check, from the preliminary plan review. So the completeness check itself is a pretty quick process. It usually takes between, you know, about a week. We like to say about 5 days for the completeness check to be done. And it may take a little bit longer. We'll send an invoice to the customer, and it may take longer depending on how long it takes for the customer to actually pay the invoice. But once that's done, we typically say about 5 days. Now, the preliminary plan review, which is, so the site plans aren't formally accepted until the preliminary plan review is completed. And we've, you know, reviewed the plans to make sure they meet all of our technical requirements. That is usually a 30 to 45 day process for that to be completed.
Paige, are you back? Okay, why don't we continue? I know it's already a few minutes past, but I'll continue for now. And Paige, you can let us know if you'd like us to stop. Some of these questions are a little long, so I'm going to pick some shorter ones just to keep so I can read them. Are all the staff supporting docs seeable by the public, or is there a sharing function? So the way it's set up for planning records is that we automatically make all of the plans and the supporting documents viewable by the public as soon as they've been submitted. So during the upload process, they're not viewable by the public yet, but once they've been submitted for review, they're viewable by both county staff and the public, and that does include plans and supporting documents. How do you restrict the residential plans?
So I see there's a note from.
Oh, go ahead, Debbie.
I was just gonna say, I see there's a note from Paige here saying she's just unable to unmute.
Oh, okay.
So we'll assume she'll know and she'll cut us off.
Sure.
Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. How do you restrict the residential plans to comply with 36.105.3 and also certain restrictions from FOIA? I'll give that to Debbie or Matt.
I'm not sure what 36 are.
I'm
Matt,
not sure
is
either.
that something that you're able to?
No, I'm not familiar with that code reference. It sounds like code. I don't know if it is.
I know Paige said that afterwards we can follow up and have access to these questions, so we can try to get some of these answered for you if we don't have time today, if we don't have the right answers. The next question was, does OnBase handle use permits? It does. It's set up to handle use permits for Arlington. I don't know, Matt or Debbie, if there's anything helpful to add there.
Yeah, I can just chime in and yeah. So it does handle use permits, and we actually modeled the use permit workflow it's basically like a simplified version of the site plan process. Instead of doing a lengthy preliminary review like we do a site plan, it just goes straight into public review once it passes completeness check. And then instead of a 120 to 180 day review cycle time, it's a 60-day review cycle time. And so, like I said, the business process is very similar to that of a site plan. It's just greatly simplified. So that has worked quite well as the county processes between 25 and 30 use permits a month.
The next question here, what is the approximate cost of integrating ePlan with Accela, and how long did this part of the project take? So costs can vary significantly based on the jurisdiction and how many users, the complexity of the project. Some of the things we talked about at the end when you compare the quick start to more of the add-on functionality can greatly impact that. So it's hard to provide a specific cost, but that's something we can follow up with after today's presentation. For more basic implementations, I did want to point out the solution is available and can be as low as $25,000 for a starting point. But again, that really depends on the situation, the locality, and whether or not you're going to be doing things like integration and payments and virtual inspections and all those things that can make the projects a little bit more challenging. The software and services are available on GSA IT Schedule 70, though.
I would also, I guess, just
go ahead, Debbie.
Just in terms of our integration between Accela and OnBase, when we contracted with Accela to build a new permitting system, they had, and I believe I wasn't around for that part of the project, but they kind of had 3 different plan review options that we could have chosen that they had already integrated with. When we got 8 months into the project and we decided to integrate with ePlan, that was something Accela had never done before. So it really was kind of a joint venture in terms of the way it was incorporated into our contract with them. But typically a plan review, or sorry, a permitting system is, I guess another one of the things that we learned along the way is that when you are thinking about a new permitting system, that you really want to kind of pay a lot of attention to what kind of plan review comes with it.
And this next question kind of goes a similar question, comparing the workflow, Accela versus OnBase and its use in the solution and in the demo. And so, there are a variety of ways to do this. What the county found is that some of the advantages of the OnBase workflow, including users being able to be in multiple groups, the simultaneous and sequential reviews both happening at the same time, a number, all the flexibility today that we saw throughout that workflow. There was enough advantage with the OnBase workflow to kind of make that the primary workflow system. And we use some of the high-level workflows in Accela to integrate the two. So just as an example, in Accela, we have something called plan review as a workflow step. But then in OnBase, we have plan review that applies to, I think it's around 40 different review groups now. And each one of those 40 groups may vary a little bit in how their workflow works. And we don't try to represent all of that in both systems. Most of that is really just in OnBase.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. We have until about 1:10.
Okay. Debbie, I'll ask this one to you. How did you train staff, and how did you bring staff on board who had objected to the changes?
Yeah, so good question and tough question. When we implemented phase 1, we had some real challenges with training, mainly because we were, until we got to the end of the process, we really didn't have completed permit types in the system in order to develop user guides for. And so we really tried to do a lot of our training without having proper user guides, and I would say that we definitely paid for that. It has been challenging. It's, you can see that we focused a lot on the customer portal, and that's really intuitive and easy to use, but the back office is not as intuitive, and so users really need to have guides for that. We did have hands-on training sessions where we walked them through it, but I guess I'll focus a little bit on about what we plan to do differently as we implement phase 2. And one of the most important things is to have user guides before you do that training. and to have them be really detailed. The second big thing that we learned is to engage our business staff in the training. You know, we, the technical team, can teach people how to use the system, but most of the questions that they have during training are really about the business process. It's kind of like, when do I choose that status? Do I need to ask my supervisor X, Y, and Z? So one of the things that we've learned and we're trying to incorporate into phase 2 is for us to partner with the key subject matter experts who helped us define the requirements and to have them really engaged in the training. So that was a kind of a short answer. I'm certainly happy to talk more with folks about that.
I guess this one is really for either of you. Well, I guess we'll make this the last question. How does the online review process for less sophisticated plan submitters, i.e. everyday homeowners submitting a shed permit, plans that might not be scaled properly and be hand-drawn? How does the county how's the online review process work for that?
I'll just kind of say I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question, because in the site plan process, typically we deal with sort of what I call like institutional applicants. So developers and land use law firms that work in the county all the time. So they kind of know what submission requirements are. They have a lot of experience with sort of like mom and pop folks submitting plans through the site plan review process. Although we have had that to some extent for use permits. And I think, it's really not too different than how we dealt with that before the permitting system. We just, when a plan, when a record is accepted for a use permit, if staff reviews it and we determine that the plans are fully sufficient to get across the information that needs to be conveyed, we will work with the applicants to say, hey, you need to change your drawings to give us a better scale or something to that effect. So that's what I would say. I don't know, Debbie, if you have any more global experience with that.
I guess just one thing to add. I would say that is one of the things when we haven't added building permits to the system yet, but they are an e-plan. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that about 50% of our users were submitting them electronically in e-plan. But we had to quickly pivot to, when we closed our permit office in March, to all of a sudden, all building permits must be submitted through e-plan. The 50% of people who weren't submitting going on. And so we had a lot of leeway that we probably, it was a hurdle that we kind of jumped over that was made a lot easier for us based on necessity. So we didn't really have to rise to that challenge. So I don't have a good answer for that one. I do want to thank Paige and the Virginia APA for giving us the opportunity to talk about this today. And I think, again, as Brian said, I think we'll have the opportunity to see these questions later. So if we didn't get to your questions, I hope that we can get back to you. And again, Brian's and my contact information are on that last slide. And if it's something that Matt needs to answer, we can loop him in as well. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to chat about this today.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and end